Chelsea, welcome to the show. Super glad to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You're a TC with TrueFlow. How long you been doing TC work?
Yeah, so I do have TrueFlow TC. I actually work with a company called the TC Collective.
Hmm.
And it's not just like transaction management type stuff, it's also operations. So really getting into a business and understanding processes and systems and how do we help the business basically be more efficient. And then a byproduct of that typically is, because we're normally working with wholesalers or investors, typically is helping them with their transaction management.
Okay, that's really interesting. What do you think is one of the biggest myths that you found so far working in this field?
That it's easy. A lot of people get into this thinking, for example, with wholesaling, it's like, oh, I'll just call a couple sellers and I'll get a deal and then I'll move. And they don't realize how much work people do for wholesaling. Um, it is insane how much work they do. And even with investors, right? If you're calling sellers to buy directly, that is very hard too. So I feel like
Hmm.
there's like this underestimate of how hard it is to do anything in general. You just see other people doing it, it makes it look really easy. And then you start to do it and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how hard this is.
Have you tried any wholesaling yourself, or is that experience from some of your clients?
I've worked for wholesalers before. So I started off as an acquisitionist before I got into transaction management and that's actually how I learned about creative finance. So I used to work for, this was back in 2021. I worked as an acquisitionist for a creative finance wholesaler. It was Creative Finance Playbook with Jen and Joe Delfave, and worked with them for quite a little while, actually. I was an acquisitionist with them for about 6 months, learned all about creative financing, how to talk to sellers, how to explain the different nuances of creative financing. And that actually really helped me when I moved into that transaction coordination role with them. And I started off with them, and then there wasn't many transaction coordinators that were doing creative financing I probably made that move around 2022. So when
Hmm.
I made that move, there was not a lot of us around. Creative finance, like Pace was still fairly new. Top tier didn't even exist. So when I came into that space, like there wasn't training for this. There wasn't a ton on the internet about this. This was something where you basically had to learn what creative financing was. And then I had to
Hmm.
figure out what to do on the back end for all the paperwork. And luckily I came across some really good attorneys, and I came across one or two other TCs that were in sub two that were also learning about it. And so I was really able to figure that out. But I know I'm saying that because, like I said, I worked for wholesalers from that capacity. I've also worked on the opposite side of that in transactions for them. Roman for
Hmm.
Homes was another one that I did a lot of business for. And I just know that it is very hard. And then when I see other newbies trying to get into it, I just always like to warn them it's a lot harder than people make it look, especially investors when they complain about assignment fees. I'm like, you have no idea how hard that is.
Yeah, the wholesalers are really going out and hunting down the deals, and they definitely have to be very good at getting told no.
Yep.
I tried my stint at wholesaling personally, and it just didn't work out for me.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things I didn't understand, and I definitely felt like coming into sub two and seeing this creative finance thing, I was like, everybody should do this. This is the greatest thing ever. So I took no time to really understand like how to do a cash deal,
Mhm.
which I think was a huge hindrance for me even getting started in the first place.
Interesting. Okay.
And I immediately came, and they say cash, 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 go for terms last. And here I was like, you don't want to do cash. How about this? And
Is
they're like,
that why
why
your
would I do
wholesaling was short?
that? Is part of the reason why my wholesaling was short, yes.
That's funny. That's funny. But at least you started off the hard way and then you're able to quickly. I have to imagine when you started to learn cash, it was a little bit easier.
um,
Did you
I
ever learn cash?
I didn't learn cash until I
Okay.
stopped trying to wholesale. And
Oh,
then one of my mentors did a breakdown on it. And I was like, wow, this makes so much more sense. I probably should have been doing this first. Um, So it was, yeah, it was definitely a good experience though. I did learn a lot just about real estate in general
mhm.
while I was going through that process, so it was definitely enjoyable.
That's awesome. Yeah. I learned the Burr method in turn, right? Cash. And then I took a mentoring program on the Burr method, did one Burr, and then got into we were like, what's the next step? What's the next thing? And then we got into, long story short, we got into the creative finance, and I've been in this world ever since.
Very nice. How many transactions are you typically closing a month?
Somebody asked me this, per month. So right now I have I think I have 4 closings next week.
Wow.
So this month, so typically I'll say I'm not too heavy right now.
Hmm.
I'm starting to build myself back up. I took a stint off in 2023 and then was slowly starting to get back into it last year. And so it was really slow last year and really I'm just trying to build a lot more this year. But depending on who you're working with, you could be closing 5, 10 deals a month. So I think when back in 2023, right before I stopped, I took that pause. I think we were closing about 5 to 8 deals a month. So trying to beat that, for sure, trying to beat that.
What does that transaction process typically look like when you're working with a TC?
As far as the process to go from contract to closing, or
Yeah,
like what the interaction is typically with your TC?
maybe a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say you should have a TC, but I don't think a lot of people might explain why you should have a TC.
Yep. And I'll use the wholesaling example. Everyone thinks that it's really easy to wholesale. And then they start to do it and they're like, oh my gosh, there is so much that I have to learn. TCing, in my opinion, is the exact same way. Can people do it? Probably, right? Like you can definitely take something to closing, give it to title, can go through it, you can close it. Are you going to know all the nuances and steps and everything that you should be doing, especially for creative, to be able to do it successfully and then set everybody up for success after closing? Depends on how many you've done, right? There's 2 sides to having help with transactions. There's the one side when you're completely new, you have no idea what you're doing, you want help. And then there's this other side where it's, hey, I'm really trying to scale, grow. What's the easiest thing that I can take off my plate to delegate? The closing the transaction, right? Because it's a definitive line. PSA, take that, give it to a transaction coordinator, and they take it to title and they coordinate with everybody and you go to close. It's obviously not that easy all the time, but that's generally the easiest piece to just let go of and give to somebody else while you continue to work on your acquisition side of things, your disposition side of things, and really trying to streamline that, whether you're an investor or a wholesaler for that matter. So there's 2 nuances to it. So if you're looking to scale, that's a really great way to pay somebody else to do that work for you. And if you look at the grand scheme of things, it's actually really relatively inexpensive for what they get for an assignment fee. So you could either sit here and focus on continuing to just try to save money and not close the deals, or you could just continue to rack up. Now you can do 10, 15, 20, 30 deals. Are you paying somebody to help you with that? Yes, but what's your return? It's going to be a lot better if you can do that many more deals. That's the one side of it, right? And then if you're a complete newbie, right? If you don't know the type of documentation that you should be getting, the questions you should be asking, the red flags you should be looking for, title is super helpful. Title reps and attorneys are amazing, but they are not representing you and the buyer unless you specifically hire them. And so I feel like a lot of times people expect like title companies to do a lot more than they're paid to do. They're not supposed to be following up with the seller, giving them updates, right? They're not supposed to be following up with the buyer, making sure that their funding is in line and all of that. They'll send emails and ask questions. Hey, we're getting ready to close. Are you ready? But you really should have somebody, if you want to be, in my opinion, at least what I've seen really good wholesaling companies or really good investing companies is they have somebody that's tracking all of that so that they can make sure that the deal closes as much as possible. So it is really helpful to have somebody helping push that through. And if you're a newbie, it's nice to have your hand held through that first deal to know that you're doing it correctly.
Yeah, I think that's huge. It sounds like there is a lot of time that is saved just by relying on someone else to help you get through the transaction, especially if you're doing this at scale. If you're doing 5, 6 deals a month, I don't think you really have time to go back and forth with the title company and make sure everybody's dotting their I's and crossing their T's.
Yes. So you're buying back your time, right? So I don't know if you follow Dan Martell, but one of his big things is, right, when you hire, you're hiring to buy back your time. What is the easiest, like in a transaction, one of the easiest things to do is to buy back your time is to not have to deal with that piece of it. Take that piece out and start handling something else and working on your business, because that's what's going to help you to be able to scale. When you focus on acquisitions and you can bring more leads in the door, and then you can focus on dispositions to be able to dispo those, then it's just a matter of getting them closed.
Mm-hmm.
And what I will say is it's not every single deal that's hard, right? Not every single deal is complicated, but typically with creative transaction, there's so many moving pieces, especially with a wholesaling, right? When your end buyer is not a wholesaler, when your end buyer is an investor, it's a lot easier, right? For the investor, they're ready to go. You can coordinate a little bit easier. They've already talked to the seller. A lot of things are ironed out. When you're a wholesaler and you're trying to assign that, Now you have to keep the buyer reined and the seller reined in. And so making sure the buyer, right, has if they have an entity, if they're doing a land trust, like what that looks like, who's the trustee, who's going to be the beneficiary, how are you going to set the land trust up? Are they going to bring a PML in? What does the PML need? Are they going to go from their directed IRA? Are they going to go from, they have to close another deal to be able to then have the funds for this deal, right? There's all of these things that you have to consider when you're working through that. And one of the things that also is really good about transaction coordinators is that we bring experience from other businesses. So it's not just, oh, I have this one business and I just know transaction coordination. No, I've worked for investors. I've worked for wholesalers before. So like for me, it's all these lessons learned from all these deals. So it's not just experience from one deal, but you're bringing experience from over 100 deals into your deal to be able to try to, what are the nuances? Where are the red flags? And can we try to avoid any of this to make sure that your deal gets to closing? So there are a lot of, I know I derailed us, I'm sorry. There are a lot of benefits to hiring somebody to help you with all of this.
No, I imagine that somebody listening to this in the future is going to be like, wow, I need to immediately go out and hire a TC because that's a lot. And I think if you're trying to do it alone, you're going to have to learn each transaction and you're going to have to learn every single piece. And it's going to take more time for you to get transactions done overall.
Yeah. What I will say is that there is a benefit to knowing that sometimes, right? So if you're going to lead a company and you want to understand to make sure that you can actually lead that person, that's one thing, right? Like maybe you want to be able to set up like SOPs for them and things like that. So you have to actually know what you're doing from that management side of things. Mm-hmm. But if you can also hire people for that, right? So it depends on how you want to run it and be able to work that into your company, what you have funds for.
So how did you know that being a TC was what you wanted to get into?
When I started off with acquisitions, I've always been here. I'll tell you this. I've always been in project management my whole life, like some form or fashion. It's just my personality. I'm very project oriented and I'm very type A, obviously. So when I was working for the wholesaler, I was always the one taking notes. I was always the one that knew, oh, let me go back in my notes and find this information. Let's save this document down. Let's set up. I was that person. And so they had a position open up. I had no idea what it was, but I knew I wanted to get more involved in the company because I wanted to be able to figure out how do I leave my W-2. Like I really want to, I'm so tired of driving to the same place every day at the same time and not working with something that was inspiring me. So applied for the job, no idea what it was. And they were like, actually, you would be really good. Like you're that person that kind of tracks things and takes notes. And that's what we need in this position. And so I pretty much moved into it and it was like, okay, what do I do? And they were like, I don't know. You're this transaction management person. And it was like, okay. And I've always been the person I don't need a lot of instruction. I need, okay, send me in this direction and I'll figure it out. So that's literally what I did. It was like, I don't know, just start figuring these deals out. We need somebody to push them through closing. So I just made an Excel sheet for myself, started to try to track things. And then over time, like just really refined my process to what it is today. Learned a lot of lessons, made probably so many mistakes that I don't even want to talk about. But yeah, it was super rewarding. And that's what got me started into transaction management. Now I'm more, I'll say, primarily heavy in operations. So I work for a short-term rental property management company right now, and I'm like really heavy in the operations side of things. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also working for the TC Collective in operations capacity too. So I do transactions for them as well. And we also do like fractional operations for different investors and wholesalers. Starting to more so break into this operation side of things, still doing the transaction management thing, but really trying to break more so into the operations.
What would you say is the biggest measure of success for you in your business?
Ooh. One of those would be money. I think everybody can agree to that, right? So how much revenue you're bringing in. And then, oh, wow, this is a good question. I love that you asked this. I've actually never thought down and really thought of, okay, what is success beyond just money? Because that's not, don't get me wrong, I want money, but
Absolutely.
That's not, yeah, everybody does. But it's definitely not necessarily at the end of the day what's driving me. For me, the biggest thing is I always think about my potential. And this is actually why I have left jobs in the past, is because I felt like I was not pushing my potential. I was not being challenged. I took a substantial pay cut to work for the job that I'm in now because I knew that this job would challenge me more and continue to grow me substantially more than the previous job that I was working for. Not that the people that I worked with were bad, like nothing against them. Mm-hmm. It was just that I knew that where I had to make that shift in my life, because at the end of the life, if I was sitting on my deathbed and somebody said, hey, are you happy? And I looked back at my career and was like, no, I did not use my brain enough. I did not push myself. I did not put myself in uncomfortable situations. And so that's probably another, I don't know how you would qualify that type of success, but to me, that's something is if I'm going to move to another opportunity and I'm not uncomfortable and stressed out, sweating, I'm like, ooh, we need to push ourselves a little bit harder. If I'm not, it's the same thing with working out. And I'm a huge advocate for that. But if I'm not scared to go under the bar to do a squat or pick up a deadlift, there's probably something wrong. You have to have confidence, but you also have to have that little, oh shit moment. And then you're like, nah, I can do this. And then you go and do it. But yeah, so I would say another measure of success for me is just continuing to push myself through those uncomfortable situations, just to continue to grow into, hopefully, I'll never cap my potential because I'm going to continue to push myself, but that's definitely one thing of continuing to improve.
I think that's really great because the fact that you left the job and took the pay cut, it sounds like you were really trying to not only challenge yourself, but also acquire new skills. And I think that's what some people miss out on is the fact that you can use jobs as a stepping stone almost to get those new skills that are actually going to get you to that end result that you're aiming for. So that's huge.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that. That was one thing. Obviously, you've probably heard of Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert
Yes.
Kiyosaki.
Yep.
That was a huge thing that I learned from him is a reset my mind of, oh, I'm not living to work. I'm working to live. And so for me, that job was not helping me to be able to achieve my goals. And so it was scary. It was really scary to take that pay cut, take that stability away, and having to shift this into a complete startup. They were pretty much brand new. We were at 45 properties at the time, which seems like a lot, but that's still a very small company. And they'd never done this before. So I was taking a huge gamble. Now I really trusted the people that I knew the people that I was going to be working with. I knew how intelligent they were. I knew how, I knew all about their personalities. I knew these people and I knew that there was no way that we couldn't make it. They wouldn't make it work. They are just superstars. And they proved that time and time again. We're at over 150 properties now. And it hasn't even been 2 years that I've been working with them and they were able to scale that quickly. So that it's really impressive what they were able to accomplish. But no, you're 100% correct. When I switched that mindset, that's really what helped me to get through that. And then I've been trying to take advantage of this opportunity as much as possible. And I've learned so much. I've been working for them almost 2 years now. I can't even, me 2 years ago to today is night and day different.
The growth that I'm sure you're able to see there. And going through some of those changes, I'm sure there was a little bit of uncertainty. How did you deal with that?
Good question. Just kept pushing through. One of the biggest mindset shifts that I've had for myself lately is to believe in myself because no one else will, right? At the end of the day, I have support. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to play victim. I have love in my life. I have a lot of support. I'm very grateful and fortunate for that. But at the end of the day, when something gets hard and I need to keep pushing, I'm the only person that can do that for myself. And so I've really learned to rely on myself of, okay, I was able to get here myself. I'm going to keep pushing. Even if it's a super crappy day and I'm all of the above, it's just one of those things where when it does get hard and you're in the grind, let's put on our boots, let's put on our jacket and let's just go figure it out because that's just how I've done it all of my prior life. And being able to pull back on that and really think hard about, we've done this before. It's just a different situation. Let's just go. I'm the person that asks all the questions. So let's just go ask all the questions and figure out, okay, what's the next step? Let's make a decision and let's move to that next step. And if it wasn't right, and this is a skill that I learned through this working with these individuals of, okay, let's make mistakes fast so that we can readjust quickly and then move forward. Because if you go slow, what I've learned is by the time you make the decision, the other person could have already had 4 other steps, knowing that it's right or wrong and being way ahead of you at that point. It's been, just trying to rely on myself to really get through whatever becomes challenging.
I really love that. I actually heard Cody Sanchez say something similar, and it was that speed loves money. And when you have an idea, you need to just take action on it because the people who wait, just like you said, there's someone else who's okay, let's start moving, let's start doing stuff. And they're now 10 steps ahead of you while you're waiting for the perfect moment to jump in.
Yeah, I will say that is a skill that I learned. It is not, so for my personality, it is not a skill being in that unstableness. I'll say for the transaction coordination type people, they like stability. They like to, okay, we have everything prepared. We have everything ready. Now let's move. And I've just learned to really just, okay, we're 70%, let's go. We're to a point where we can figure this out. Let's just pull the trigger and let's go and let's see what happens. Because even if I think, and I've actually seen this in real, I'll give you a story. At my old job, I used to work for the government. That's where I work. So you can imagine why I'm saying what I'm saying about my previous job. Nothing wrong with the government. It's just a lot different of a speed. And yes. So at my previous job, I was in project management. We were doing construction, and these were like massive buildings. They held like hundreds and hundreds of people. So these projects, the one that I worked on was like a $1 billion project. And with that project, we were like at the very beginning when they were doing the contract, they're like, oh, we have this other, there was 2 projects going on, a little bit delayed. And you would think, oh, let's finish one project and then learn all the lessons from that and then take it to the next project. Unfortunately, that's not how funding works in the government. So you can't do that. So you start one project and then a year or 2 later, you start the other project. So you're like moving. So you're trying to like, okay, hey, we just learned that, and you throw it over to the other project. One of the things about the one project that started right before ours was that they had some electrical equipment, and they could go ahead and give that over to us. And it would save our project like $25 million. We were like, oh, yeah, no brainer. We have a year of cushion, no problem. There's no way, even if the other contractor gets delayed, there's no way they'll go over a year of delayment, right? That's what you're all thinking. So we're going, everything's great. And then all of a sudden it comes time that the government has to provide this contractor. Oh, let me back up a second. So our contract goes through, we say, hey, we're going to provide you guys this electrical equipment, give us the credit backs. That way the government can save millions of dollars. And it seemed like a no-brainer again. So we set everything up, we go, we're doing construction and everyone's watching. And all of a sudden it gets to the point where we need these electrical equipment. And we're like, hey, project, can you go ahead and send this over? And they're like, oh, we're not done with it yet. And you're like, what? Okay, no problem. We'll wait a month or 2. And they're like, yeah, that should be fine. A month or 2 rolls around. Hey, we really need this. Our contractor is starting to get to a point where eventually we're going to need it. And then it's going to start to impact them. And then it's going to come back on us to actually owe them money. And they're like, okay, we can't give it to you yet. We're like, all right, no problem. And this happened several times to the point where over a year happened and we still didn't have this electrical equipment. And it became a massive change order to the project. I'm talking millions and millions. So we ended up having to pay the contractor for delaying them, which completely wiped out what we thought in the beginning was this super, oh, no problem. We would absolutely be able to get this credit. And then there's no way that we won't be able to hit that deadline. And we didn't. And we ended up owing, and it was a massive project issue that actually carried on for months and months to be able to negotiate what that actual final cost was. So long story short, I'm saying that because if you think that you are 100%, I know that there's no way that this is going to be an issue. There are so many outside of like impacts that could happen on that one decision that you can't control. To your point earlier, just move forward. Because that was a huge eye-opening experience that I went through to really feel comfortable of I'm never going to know everything to make a decision. So get 70% of the way there and just make a decision and move forward.
That's the cog in the wheel. And they were like, it's fine. We'll get it handled. And they backed up everything else, it sounds like. And eventually it snowballs. And as they say, shit rolls downhill.
Yeah, that's a really good way to say it. Again, it really reinforced to me that everybody was so sure there's no way we can mess this up. And sure as shit, it got messed up because there was things outside of our control that happened. And it is what it is. And obviously you get through it, but that's the type of stuff that you really learn that lesson.
It sounds like you are front and center leading your team. Are there times when you have to help people get over their mindset issues and push them along with you to get the job done?
For, I'll say operations, there's definitely been, so we're in short-term property management. And I like to compare it to a hospital. You have nurses that are on the floor, and then you have emergency room nurses. Short-term rental is emergency room nurses 24/7. Everything needs to be done now because you can imagine if a guest is at a house and the AC breaks or they're unhappy because there's cleaning, you have to react right then and there. Otherwise, you're going to get a bad review. And I don't think people understand how bad 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, 1-star reviews really impact your property and being able to get views on it and being able to get reservations.
4 stars.
Yeah, even 4 stars because it impacts your rating. So think about when you go to Airbnb, for example, and you see a property, they're about the same price, one with a 5-star, one with, let's say, a 4.8. You're most likely going to go to that 5-star, right? There's just so much inventory in the market that if you're not top performing with those types of reviews, and especially in the market that we're in, I'll say. So we're in the Disney market, so it's super competitive. So you can't just throw a house up and expect it to do well. There's a lot of nuances to it. And so those reviews, we've seen a lot of impact from bad reviews. So getting a 3-star review and really dropping our review score, we won't be able to get reservations because we won't be seen. So it is huge to our impact. So a lot of times there's things like that happen and you have to keep, okay, this is a really hard situation. We have a really hard guest right now, for example, and it's keeping everybody's mindset positive, or guys, this sucks, but we're in the trenches together. Let's like push this through. And that's the type of like leadership style that I like. I'm not one to sit aside and let them do it. Sometimes with like training, like you have to push them off the edge and be like, all right, you can do this. But sometimes it's that I'm going to be in the trenches with you if needed. I'm right here by you, like helping you through this. I'll show you the first time if needed. But that's one of the things that I really like, mindset. And I think it helps when you do it, when you've been through that, you can explain it to them. And then it's, hey, I know this sucks, but we're going to get through this. Keep your mindset positive.
I think that's really great. And I think that is something that a lot of leaders might be missing out on. I really learned that while I was in the military. I was in the Army for 3 years. And when there was someone that was trying to tell us what to do and they weren't out in the field with us, it was like, why should we listen to you? Why should we do anything you say? But to see that person actually coming in and pulling their weight and like picking up the slack in places, it's just an entirely different field. And I really think it builds on that team cohesion.
Especially being in the military and some of like probably the physical rigor that you guys went through of having somebody come in and tell you what to do. That's clearly has not gone through what you guys have done. That's got to be really difficult from a mindset perspective too.
There were some times when it was definitely challenging, and there are some. Now, I'm sure everyone's experience was not like this, but I referred to it sometimes as a high school for grown-ups, because there was a lot of petty things that could happen, and so you just learn to deal with it. But at the end of the day, you really have to be able to rely on your leadership to be able to get down with you and get their hands dirty, which it sounds like you're doing a great job at.
I appreciate that. I'm trying. It's not always easy, but definitely, again, another skill that I've been able to learn is emotional intelligence. When shit hits the fan and you just you have a million people, right? Like you have all these things that are going on in the background. The way that you show up for your team is the way that your team's going to show up. And I will be 100% honest. Like I'm not good at it. I'm still working on this skill. I'm really trying to be better about it. But you follow the Hermosis, Layla and Alex Hermosi. I'm a huge, obviously, operation. So I love Layla. And that's one thing that she has really stressed of like showing up for your team, and how you do it is how they're going to show up too. And I did notice that, right? If I came in and I was like super frantic about something, the team would be super frantic. If I came in and I was like calm, okay, what's the next step? What are we going to do here? Just tell me what the issue is. They were calm. And it really changed how a situation was handled. And so again, it's still a skill I'm working on. I'm not, it's one of those things. Sometimes I'm like, all right, turn your camera off and just calm down and then get back to it. But yeah, I think it's a skill that can apply in any type of situation, right? Like even in your relationships, if you have a fight with a friend, if you have a fight with your spouse, like if you're able to calm down, then typically it de-escalates the situation so much more than if you both are just escalated. It doesn't help anything.
Mm-hmm. Was there a tough deal that you were working on that elevated your mindset in that leadership role?
There's been some super tricky deals for myself, and then also just having the network of other transaction coordinators and going back and forth with them on some of the deals or experiences that they have on deals. I think the biggest mindset shift is just to continue to like, how do we figure this out? And not saying, okay, we can't do this. Just, okay, I know that we can't do this now, but what do we do to figure it out? I don't want to just come to you. And this is a skill. It's interesting how much you learn different skills, and people don't realize like all these things are skills, right? Like time management, skill, being on time to things, skill, like being able to communicate, emotional intelligence, like all these things are skills that you have to continuously work on. And that's one, in my opinion, too, of whenever you have a really difficult deal, and it could not even just be the deal itself. You could be working with like just a crappy title company or a crappy seller, and it just drains you. And it takes forever to pull things out of them. And it's hard. There are times when your title company won't respond to you, and you have the buyer or the wholesaler barking down your neck of what's going on. And you're calling and emailing and texting and calling and all these things. You can't get an update because the title company is the one that has all the updates for you. So it can be really frustrating at times. And I think the biggest thing is just really the skill of staying calm in those situations and just being positive of, okay, this is going to work out for the positive. I'll give you an example. We had one deal where it was a man and a woman friends. They were going to be the buyers on the deal. And we had a seller. There was a realtor on the property. And so we got the mortgage statement. It was going to be a subject to deal. We got the mortgage statement and everything was happy-go-lucky. And so we were going through this and we pull title work and we find out there's more liens on the property. And then we pull those payoffs. And it ended up just being, and these were new buyers too. So not only do you have this heightened, oh my gosh, like I'm really doing this thing, but now you're starting to add cash to this. And so typically with like other investors, you've done this 100 times. You're like, okay, let's figure out the numbers. Does this make sense? The numbers don't lie. It's just a very unemotional thing. But if it's a new investor and they're investing $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, that's a lot of money, especially for your first time. And so it was those heightened emotions of, oh my gosh, we have so much more money now. And this was a wholesale deal. So obviously the wholesaler's trying to work through this with them because they want to make the assignment. They want this deal to go through. We wanted to help the seller to get out of a bad situation. And the seller was the wholesaler obviously wanted the business, but really it was the seller was just in trouble and they couldn't afford the house anymore. And so there was so many conversations between myself and the buyers of just trying to de-escalate the situation of, guys, can you still make the numbers work? If you can still make the numbers work, do you still want to move forward? Those types of situations is the more we uncovered with this deal, to the point where then it got to the point where one partner was in and one partner was out. Whenever time there's partners, the emotions between them kind of start to gravitate onto you because they're like trying to go through you when you're all talking together. But that was one deal that I really learned of just stay calm and just sometimes you just need to let people breathe. And they ended up coming back. I remember there was like an argument between them. They were about to back out. We just let it sit. And the next day we came back and we're like, just had a serious conversation. Hey, this is where we're at. You guys can still make this work. We can still close on time. What do you want to do? And they were like, you know what? We're going to move forward. And it was literally like, just like that night, they just needed to relax and calm down. And so being able to just evaluate, when do I need to push and when do I need to back off, and having that mindset of, we can get through this, just keep pushing, just keep having those conversations. That deal closed. Everything ended up working out fine. But yeah, there was fleas involved that no one knew about. Like it was an interesting deal.
It definitely sounds messy.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're in a lot of high stakes situation. How do you, recoup your mindset? And what's a de-stressor for you?
Working out. And weirdly enough, cleaning. I like to clean. I don't know why. I find myself when I get like super stressed, it just is one of those like mind numbing things that I can just do. So I'm a doer. I'm a type A personality. I don't like to sit down. I suck at sitting still. Probably why an emergency room type atmosphere. That's just always how I've been. And so probably why the government didn't work for me, because things were so slow. And I was just like, all right, we need to do something. We need to do something. So, how do I decompress? A lot of times I like to go lift weights. I like to pick them up and put them down because it's just that adrenaline, yeah, I just did that. But then again, it's like, again, another reference for Dan Martell, I'll say, because I just love that man is so intelligent. So I was diagnosed with ADD when I was younger. Who knows if I actually have it or whatever else. I was never medicated, but working out helps me to calm the mind. And so for me, I'm taming the body with that. And then I'm able to really help move forward. So anytime there's something super stressful, I'm either cleaning or I just go to the gym and I just try to lift it out.
I think that's great. Everybody has their own outlet. Me personally, there have been times where I like just get in the zone with cleaning and like hours go by and everything's spotless. And I'm like, wow, that was cathartic.
And it feels good. And you feel clean after that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, there's definitely been some times when I find myself cleaning and then it ends up turning into like this deep clean. And then once you're done, you feel gross, but you shower and you're like, oh my God, I just feel so clean because the house is clean. It's the best feeling.
It's like that new car smell, but for your house.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I'm going to start using that.
So when it comes to your team, how do you identify maybe new talent and nurture that talent?
Ooh, this is a good question. I was actually listening to a podcast about this the other day, that I feel like a lot of people in the whole premise of the podcast was talking about retaining talent. And one of the things I feel like in business that people do is they really focus on individuals that are not performing and they spend a lot of attention on them. Whereas instead of spending time on top talent killers that you want to just continue to increase and show them their appreciation, you tend to spend a lot of time to bring the bottom up instead of just like pushing up whoever's on top more up and then just replacing the bottom so that they can continue to grow. That was definitely a mindset shift for me. That was a huge thing of really really starting to nurture people that you appreciate how much harder they work, because a lot of times if they're doing what they need to do, you just leave them alone, right? You're like, oh, you're good. Like you're doing what you need to do. I need to go pay attention to these people who aren't, but you really should be helping these other people. The other thing that I've really honed in on and really trying to work with is setting expectations for people. I feel like a lot of times that is a huge miss for new hires of those expectations. So I'll give you an example. We just brought on some new transaction coordinators to the TC Collective. And one of the biggest things was we had a deal that came in and we were all, hey, you grab this deal, you go run with it. You need to get out to that client like right away, get them on the phone, figure out what they need, understand like what the deal timeline looks like. Is this one that needs to be pushed like immediately, or kind of those types of things? We didn't set that expectation up front. And so for us, the person that received the deal didn't run with it right away. So it was like, hey, are you doing anything with this? And it was like, oh. And so that was, again, I have so many examples of this, but that was okay, let's reset. And did we set the right expectation of how we want deals to be handled? When a deal comes in, you need to be responding in X amount of time. You need to be at least acknowledging the customer. Hey, we received your deal. We're evaluating everything. We'll be in touch in X amount of time. I think that's the biggest thing, because nobody likes to be in a big black box. And so if you have an employee that doesn't know how they're doing, that's frustrating, right? They think they're doing okay, but then behind the scenes, you guys are complaining about them and all this other stuff. Did you set the expectation that they know what to meet? And if they're not meeting that, then have you told them that? And have you told them specifically how to improve, and not just, hey, you're not doing well, we really need you to step it up? That's not good guidance. That was one of my biggest frustrations working for the government, is you would get these reviews from like your yearly review, and they would say, hey, you're doing a great job, you're just not there yet. What does that mean? And they would just be ambiguous. It wouldn't be pinpointed actions of what you actually need to do. Hey, you didn't save any money on your projects. You really need to start getting creative to figure out how are you going to start saving money for the project so that you can next year be able to show that on your review. Hey, I was really good about being creative. Here's the solution that I came up with. Here's how much money we saved, and here's what was the benefit to the project. So being that, like, setting those clear expectations for people has been a huge thing, a huge mind shift. And it's being able to help people accountable to those expectations so they know where they stand.
That's big, because when you come in as someone new to any company and they just put you in a position and say go, you might have an idea what to do, but you might not actually be able to meet their expectations. And I think you hit the nail on the head, where sometimes the leadership is blaming that person when it's okay, but you hired them. You're the one in charge of training them. So who's really screwing up here?
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing, is even if they're not meeting the expectations, if you've set the expectation and they're not meeting it, okay, then what's that gap and how do you help fill it? Is it training? Maybe they're just really not a good fit for the position, right? Is there a system that they're missing that they really need to be able to hit? It just gives you a lot more insight into what's going on. But if it's like this open-ended thing and they're just trying, it's just frustrating on both ends.
Alex Hormozy had said, when you're building out your process, you do exactly what you're doing step by step, write everything down. You take one person, you give them that process, you walk them through it the first time, and then you let them go through that checklist on their own. And if they follow the checklist and it works, then it works. But if they screwed up, then you need to find out where in the checklist you didn't explain something correctly.
That is huge, right? I love that you just said that. That's an analogy too, because you're training them. And if your process sucks, then they're going to suck because they're following what you taught them. Now, if you've taught them, now that's a whole different story, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where it becomes okay, my expectation is for us to work on this for a month or two. If you don't pick it up by then, okay, were my expectations realistic, or is there a skill gap? It just gives you so much more insight into how to help them.
Outside of the TC work, the short terms, is there any hobbies or passion projects that you have?
I was talking to hobbies someone the other day, and I was like, do you do anything else besides working? I don't really have any other passion projects. I wish that I need to create more time in my life. I don't right now, but I used to volunteer at soup kitchens and when I was younger with my mom and my grandma, and I loved that. It was just so rewarding, and I would love to be able to get back into that. Something about being able to work and help people at the same, again, I just love doing stuff. And so for me, I don't enjoy like sitting down and watching movies or sitting down, and I actually don't like to sit down and read either. I listen and read at the same time because it gives me a little bit more something to do. But So like for me, it's if I'm going to go do something, it's working out is definitely a hobby of mine. And I try to make sure that I get that in, because if I don't get that in, I just know that I have that like itch in the back of me every day. But yeah, I would love to just find more. I need to be able to prioritize and find more time to do stuff like that, like going and helping at soup kitchens or something along those lines. Because I used to also like, I forget which rescue it was. I'm super I love dogs. And I used to go help if they had like adoption events. And so I would go and help set up and answer questions for people if they had them. And then we would help tear stuff down. And I did that. And I don't do that anymore. And I really need to find time to go do stuff like that now.
Yeah, I think the entrepreneurial life can definitely be tough in finding outside sources of not only entertainment, but things that also fuel you instead of just having the work. Because the work is great, you might be enjoying it, but you should also be experiencing life at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
So I
No,
think that's a huge thing.
I love that you said that. Definitely like family and travel, I would say, are the two things that I need to find more time for.
Where would you travel to?
Oh gosh, a lot of different places. My husband and I's one of our goals is to get to all 50 states. So we're not there yet. We did drive across country last year. So we hit a bunch of states last year. So we flew out to California and then drove back to West Virginia. We were able to hit a bunch. And then we also drove to Texas and back. So we hit a bunch of states then too. But yeah, we love food. And so we love to travel for food. And we've been to the trips last year were not for food. Actually, so a lot of those were business trips that were like at that point where we're like more traveling for business and, oh, hey, I have to go do a conference. So Squat Up, for example, is in March. So my husband's coming with me. I'm going to go do Squat Up conference. He's going to go find some jujitsu gyms and do that. But we used to travel a lot for food. So like we went to, have you ever heard of Alenia, the 3-star Michelin restaurant in Chicago?
I have not.
Oh man, it's good. And they have a speakeasy and they have a cocktail restaurant where it's like scientific cocktails that are super cool. But so we would go and do stuff like that. Like we'd find a really cool restaurant and be like, let's go plan our whole trip around this. So getting back into that would be awesome. We had some really good food.
No, that sounds super cool.
Yeah.
Typically, I ask people about books, but are there any local restaurants in PA that you would recommend?
Oh, in PA.
Or
Well,
Maryland?
I was going to say, you're
Anywhere
not
in
that far from Maryland and West Virginia.
Yeah, I'm willing to drive for some food. If I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
I was going to say, we've driven 3 hours to a place in New Jersey for donuts. So come on, if you're going to say that you like food, you gotta be willing to drive good places. So the funny thing is, so we originally lived in Baltimore City.
Mhm.
And you can imagine, like, this was before COVID. And there was so many good restaurants in Baltimore City. We haven't been back in years, so I have no idea what the food scene looks like in Baltimore City. But there were so many good places. And in 2020, during COVID, we moved to West Virginia. And there are so many good places that we have found since we've moved here, just in and around the little area, as well as like in Winchester. Frederick has some. It's not that far away, but just like even in Martinsburg area too.
Mhm.
Our favorite place is what is that place? Oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. Our favorite restaurant. I totally forgot about it in Lovettsville.
We won't tell them.
No, I wish my husband was here right now. He would totally. The restaurant at Potomac Farm. When you go to it, basically it's like a prefix meal. I'm sure you've been to restaurants where they have prefix meals where you basically pay like, I don't know, we've been to places that are super, super expensive, but you pay like a fixed fee, let's say like $100, and they give you like a set course meal. So you look up online, you can look up their menu and see what it is. We love this place because it's a lot of farm to table. So we like a lot of like fresh ingredients. Last year, I think it was last year, their chef changed though. And we haven't been back since the new chef took over. So we're a little bit nervous to go back because Vincent Bernardi was the chef at the time and he was phenomenal. Like he was just so creative and his plates were really good. So we need to get back there, but that was our favorite restaurant for a while. I'm trying to think of if I'm going to give you a recommendation, like it has to be so good. Like I can't there's so many good places I can be like, oh yeah, like this place is not bad, but it's got to be so good. So the restaurant at Potomac Farm is really good. I'm going to leave it. There was another one in Virginia that was a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Now you got me talking about food and I can talk about food all day. I love talking about real estate, but I also love talking about the Inn in Little Washington. These are like expensive places, but it is absolutely worth it.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
You should check that one out. They actually have a documentary on how this restaurant, it's like a little town, but the town revolves around the little like hotel or the inn.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really cool to see how they actually got the 3-star Michelins. Are you familiar with 3-star Michelin restaurants?
I know that they are really good.
Okay, yes.
I'm not familiar with the whole ranking system, but I know the more stars, the better.
Yes. Yeah. 3 star is the top. So if you find there's not many 3 star around here. So the ones that we've been to have been really good.
Definitely going to have to go try it. If you could leave listeners with one thing to take away from this conversation, what do you think that would be?
I like to think of this question as what I would tell myself 5 years ago. And one of the biggest things that I just keep thinking because it was a mindset shift is that I can do it. That's the biggest thing that I would tell myself 5 years ago of just keep going. You can figure it out. Everyone else has done it. Why can't you? Right. So that was the biggest thing is you can figure this out. Just keep going. And if you're uncomfortable, just learn to deal with that uncomfortableness.
It sounds like you've worked through a lot of that self-doubt, that imposter syndrome, and just putting in the work to just get over it and keep pushing.
Yeah, I'm not over it. I still get it all the time. There are plenty of times, but it's definitely one thing that I've learned when I encounter something that I don't know, like a deal, for example. If there's a deal that somebody comes to me and I've only done it, let's say like one time, right? Like Morby methods. We don't get a lot of Morby methods. And I've worked on one before and it didn't close. 9 times out of 10, Morby methods won't close. The numbers don't work. But I'm not scared to say no to somebody that comes to me with it because I'll figure it out. Like I'm confident in myself that I'll ask enough questions and have enough resources now, especially that I can figure it out. And that was probably the biggest thing that I've learned over the years of even if you don't know how to do it, just say yes and figure it out. And if you don't know, it's okay to, I'm very upfront with investors too. Hey, I've never done this, but we can work through this and I can help you figure it out. And a lot of times, like if they know you and they like you, they're like, okay, yeah. Or if you're a new or a newbie, right? Like a new transaction coordinator and you don't know how to do a deal, you say, okay, I don't know how to do this. I know a little bit about it, but I have a whole support system behind me that if I have questions, I know that I can go to people. And people appreciate that you're upfront with them, but in that you're bringing them a solution and not just saying, hey, I don't know how to do this. Because that doesn't get you anywhere. They didn't know how to do it, but they went out and figured it out, right? It's the same thing where anybody, no one is born knowing how to do all of this stuff. And so that's been something that's really helped me to push through. And I'm still learning that.
I think that's great. I think it's very hard to have that moment of vulnerability, especially when you're doing something new, to just say, hey, I'm sorry, but I really don't know. But let me go talk to my team and see what we can figure out. Is that okay?
Yeah, that was one thing. I was actually speaking with an attorney the other day, and we obviously I'm a transaction coordinator, and it was like, hey, I've come across really bad transaction coordinators, and it was like, oh shit, okay, why are they bad transaction coordinators? And it was like they just bring problems, and I'm like, okay, then what would you classify like a great transaction coordinator? I don't want to be good, I don't want to be fine. What's a great transaction coordinator? And he was like, bring a problem and bring a solution. If you don't know, that's okay. No one expects you to know everything, but say, I don't know. Here's what I do know, and here's what I recommend we do to go figure it out. To me, it's why would people not do that anyways? But I guess that's just not something that a lot of people just say, I don't know, and that's it. Or if you have a problem, instead of saying, I have a problem, here's what I know so far, here's what I'm going to move forward next, here's what I recommend we do next, or here's what we're going to try to do. It's, I have this problem. What do I do? And so that's even like a good leadership thing, right? A lot of people delegate up to you because a lot of times like you'll know answers and it's no, push it back down. Like I'm not delegating, you're not delegating it up to me. I already know this. You need to figure it out so that next time this happens, like you can figure it out again.
I heard a great quote again by Alex Hormozy, and
I love them.
People call you all the time with emergencies, and the real deal is there's no emergencies. If there's no fire, no one's bleeding or dying, you can usually talk somebody through an issue and then they realize, hey, this is not an emergency. Let me take a deep breath and let me go figure this out.
Yeah. Comes back to the emotional, right? If you stay calm, they will probably calm down. Unless somebody's on fire or something. That's a little bit different of a situation. But please don't ever apologize about quoting or talking about Layla Hormozy or Alex Hormozy. I talk about them all the time because it's just so applicable. They are so good. Yes, they are so good at what they do. And if anybody on this has not checked them out, you are seriously missing out. Like you absolutely go check both of them out. Are really good. They both are phenomenal.
Big time. I would say Cody Sanchez too. I recently started listening to her and she's just dropping gems all over the place. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And Dan Martell was another one. I listened to a lot of Layla Hormozy and Dan Martell just because they're more of like operators, systems, processes. So that helps me to refine my skill. I'm also interested in that. But I love listening to Alex, especially. I don't know. Have you bought his books yet?
I have $100 million leads.
Okay. So that's the first volume, right?
Offers is first.
No, Offers the
Leads
first.
is
Yeah.
second,
Okay.
and then Sales will be the next book coming out.
There's apparently going to be like 4 or 5. I'm trying to get through Offers. I bought 2. I bought Leads, and then I was like, oh, let me start with 1, and then I'm reading through them right now, and I'm so impressed by. I'm not even all the way through it, but I love it already.
I actually won $100 million leads from a contest that the Think Big podcast was doing.
Oh, super cool.
Yeah. So I got it and I was ecstatic. And it took me, and honestly, I still haven't completely read through the book physically, but I have listened to it on audio probably 7 or 8 times, to the point where one day I was leaving to go travel somewhere and I was like, should I bring the book with me? And then I was like, but what if I want the resources? And then I literally repeated word for word one of the things about the QR code in the book. And I was like, don't need to bring it with me. I'm good.
Yeah. The way that he makes it a workbook, right? And so you can actually it is literally like a 3rd grade workbook, and it's super actionable. And the way that he wrote it is very impressive. Like, it's probably hands down one of my favorite books, just from the mere way he presents it.
Breaking things down from a high level where certain people are going to get it till everybody can understand it here.
Yes, the actionable steps. And yeah, their business plan is super. They're like next level. I could go on. I could go on for days about how that's another thing. Real estate, food, and Alex and Layla Hermosi, about how intelligent they are and just how good they are at what they do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chelsea, this has definitely been an awesome conversation. Where can people go to find out more about what you're doing, what you're working on?
So I'm trying to be more active on social media. So you can find me on Instagram and Facebook primarily at True Flow TC. So True TRU Flow FLOWTC. You should be able to find me on Instagram and Facebook with that handle. So yeah, check me out. Say hi. Would love to chat and meet new people in this space. I'm always trying to network. That's how I met you. So.
Antietam Brewery meetup. That's what I call it.
Yes.
Sub 2 meetup. Awesome place. If you are in Maryland or PA or West Virginia, come hang out. Great time.
Yeah, it is. Cool.
Chelsea, thanks again for coming. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed hanging out on a Friday night.
Thank you for watching this episode of Zero to Growth. If you got value from this episode, please like, subscribe, share it with a friend. And if you are wanting to connect with Chelsea, get some transactions done, maybe just talk about business and mindset, check the links down in the show notes, and we will see you in the next episode. Peace.